Alright guys, HyDra here again today. I hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day. So far, the World Cup is just around the corner and this year is sharing many similarities with what happened this time last year. OpTic the World Champions, FaZe top 6 of the World Championship, looking for redemption out there in Saudi Arabia. Last year they got it and they stuck with their roster through the season, completed the three-peat, winning Major 1, Major 2 as well, before it then fell off at Major 3, Major 4, and they bombed out of the World Championship, raising serious questions to FaZe whether they can really keep this roster again going into next year, especially with some of the comments now in 2 consecutive World Championships about the way that Cellium is playing for this team. Very much into your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Just wanted to quickly mention it. I don't know if this affects anything for you guys in terms of the way that you perceive the World Cup, but I thought I'd share it because there was some talk about it. So this was the World Cup opening ceremony that Post Malone did. Look, as I'm sure you can tell, there is no expense spared for this tournament. You've got Cristiano Ronaldo promoting it. I mean, of course, like, he's out there in Saudi playing football. Obviously, you know, they're going to probably want him to get involved. And yeah, look, this looks particularly spectacular for sure. And there's been talk to say, well, you know, this tournament... Now, obviously, it must be said, this is not the opening ceremony for the Call of Duty side of the Esports World Cup. Really. It's not like Post Malone comes on stage just for the COD event. This is for the entire Esports World Cup, which is like an 8-week tournament from now until near enough the end of August, right? There's lots of esports getting played out there over the next couple of months. The COD stuff is in a couple of weeks' time. It was a bit later last year. The Warzone stuff, I don't even know when that is, and frankly, who cares? But this is for the entire tournament, right? It's not just for the COD stuff, so I guess that's worth keeping in mind, maybe. But, of course, there's been some discussion here, how much the World Cup really counts. Look, it's not the World Championship, obviously, but does it count as much as a major? Is it more than a major? Is it less than a major? What does the single elimination matter in all of this? You know, who knows? It doesn't really matter, maybe, because at the end of the day for the players, the money's still relevant. But I guess it does matter in the sense that the teams have to make a value call as to how much EWC matters in terms of their decision-making, right? Because the World Championship is the biggest tournament in every regard, and that is no surprise. And therefore, most team decisions are based on what the team did at Champs. But last year, FaZe winning the World Cup kept them together, for sure. And maybe in hindsight, you could have argued that, well, you know, how serious was it as a tournament? It was definitely a serious tournament. There was lots of money on the line. But it was single elimination. They beat OpTic on the way to winning that championship, which they went on to do, taking down Thieves, of course. And, yeah, FaZe won the championship. They stuck it out. And maybe they shouldn't have done it in hindsight, or maybe they should have done. They still won 2 events this season. It's easy to forget the way that the latter part of the season went for those guys. But the other teams do have to make a call as well. If the World Cup doesn't matter, then it's like, well, why would we base our roster decisions on it? But I think this year, the teams are taking their practice more seriously for the World Cup than they did before. And as a result of that, team decisions will be made based on the results of the World Cup and, of course, at the World Championship. Probably mainly the World Championship, but I'm expecting most teams, frankly, to blow it up regardless. It's just for OpTic, for example, if they turn up to the tournament and they have a really difficult time. The thing is, last year OpTic went out kind of early in the bracket, but they did play a single elimination bracket play and they happened to play FaZe. So it's like, even if you bomb out early on, how much does it mean? Because you might just happen to play a really good team in a best of 5 single elim and you lose, and it's like, well, you know, what do we really learn from that? We dominated our group, we lost 1 series and we're back home. So it's difficult to call. The teams will get a feel though for what they want to do after the World Cup. Of course, this is some of the prize money split. Just to say that the prize money is split more like equitably than at the World Championship. At Champs, it's 800k for the winning team. At the World Cup, it's 600k. But because Champs only has 8 teams, it goes down quite dramatically from there, whereas the World Cup actually spreads the money out more so over some other teams. So even if you turn up and get dead last, you make 20 grand. And then if you come not dead last, but third in your group, you make, what, 40 grand. So that's split across 10 grand each for the players. And then if you're top 8, you make 80 grand. And, well, anyway, this is the prize pool for the championship, and it will be relevant for what the teams decide to do after the event concludes. And maybe for a team like FaZe as well. And that's been one of the big discussions over the last few days as to what FaZe are going to do. Does that mean anything for OpTic as well? That's a big question. I mean, maybe it shouldn't be a big question, but it probably depends on the World Cup a little bit as to whether OpTic would consider Simp, for example, if he was available. We think that Falcons are very much going to be looking to go and grab aBeZy. Maybe, I don't know. Again, it depends, but there is a rumor anyway that Falcons are looking for a high-profile SMG, likely one of the tiny terrors you would think, to partner Pred next year. That does not seem like an impossibility as it stands. So there's a good chance that the FaZe team, whatever happens at the World Cup, are put under serious pressure to break up by other teams. I mean, Falcons, really, like, you know, going in there and trying to see if they can make something happen, and maybe it applies for other teams too. Even Thieves, like if they have a horrific World Cup and they find out that, well, Simp might be available, you know, even aBeZy, I don't know, like, is it something that you think about? I think you have to think about it, given the success that those guys have had over the last half a decade here since the seed has first come around. Success in terms of always being there on Sunday, although FaZe, the last couple of World Championships, has decided that instead of losing on Sunday, they simply won't make it to Sunday. And that's not gone to plan, obviously, for them. But for FaZe, it was a fascinating year last year because they did very well. They went to champs, they came top 6. They decided they were nearly going to blow it up. The belief is that Cellium thought after last year's champs that he was going to get dropped. They turned up to the World Cup, they won it, they stuck it out, and, you know, was that the right call? I mean, look, they won a couple of tournaments this year, and they were very competitive all season long, but in hindsight, should they have made a change? Maybe they'd have said yes. I mean, they certainly weren't intending to keep the same roster as last year to get top 6 again at champs, which was the big downfall for them. And understandably, a lot of FaZe fans and just COD fans in general are trying to say, okay, what happened with FaZe at champs? Why have they had these back-to-back-to-back, really, because they were top 3 back in Modern Warfare 2 as well? Difficult performances at the biggest tournament of the season. Who's to blame? Simp had his 58 card, of course, which was horrific for the standards there. It's Crowder to blame, right? The coaches of the team not doing a good enough job. You know, it's difficult to argue exactly what the cause is. It's probably numerous things. But there does seem to be a feeling that either FaZe, they turn up to the World Championship and aren't quite able to deliver at the level that they want, or simply their execution and their play isn't strong enough. I mean, OpTic didn't really scrim FaZe leading up to champs because they were going to play in the first round, which is, of course, what they did. They scrimmed them like once and they smoked him. And OpTic said the only teams in scrims that really fought them were Surge and Thieves. And maybe FaZe weren't really looking that good going into the biggest tournament of the year. Certainly OpTic were very confident they would beat them if they played. And of course they knew they would play. And they played them in the first round and they 3-0'd them straight off the main stage. Often the talk with FaZe comes back to playstyle, and especially the way that Cellium plays the game. Because Cellium plays the game unlike many other ARs. He, you know, I think this year, honestly, I think he was more impactful. I think he was faster. I think he was generally better, but it is still a conversation around the way that FaZe approach things, and it's not to say that this is necessarily Cellium's fault. The talk has always been, well, Cell could play faster if he wanted to, he did back in the day, but the team seems happy with the way that Cellium plays, and he's dropping good numbers, but he doesn't play as aggressive as Scrap does, and in the last couple of years, it's got to be said, Dashy and Cellium were compared as very similar players back in Vanguard, right? Because in Vanguard, they were both going toe-to-toe for the MVP. They were both dropping 1.2s over the season, and Cell got it in the end. Dashy didn't get it, but he won an event and Cellium didn't. Maybe Cell was more consistent and slightly higher KD. There was all sorts of talk that year. But Shotzzy said very recently that he actually didn't like playing with Dashy back in Vanguard because he didn't think he played the game the right way. And if Shotzzy ever played with Cellium, I think he would probably, based on the way that Shotzzy likes to play the game, have a similar assessment there. But it's got to be mentioned, right, that since that Vanguard season, when Cell and Dashy were going toe-to-toe for the MVP that year, and both played the game in a pretty similar way, Dashy has adapted his playstyle quite a lot. He's now much more objective-focused, Dashy, than he used to be. And his KD is way worse. Dashy's KD, you know, from a 1.2, you're now talking 1.08, probably something in that kind of ballpark over the course of a season. But he's now won 2 back-to-back World Championships, right? So that probably tells you something. And I thought it was very interesting, this clip that people were talking about, comparing last year's World Championship when Toronto played FaZe, and Scrap stood up and said to Cell, like, are you trying to win? Like, what's going on? Like, how are you playing right now? Doesn't seem very conducive to winning. And then a year later, and yeah, look, it's a bit of trash talk from Dashy. You're there on main stage with your team. I know that Cellium's his boy, but, you know, obviously you're going to say a few things. And Dashy makes it clear that, yeah, as far as he was concerned, in that game 1 Hassie and the hardpoint they won, he was, you know, feeling the way that Cellium was putting pressure on the map and wasn't feeling all that much pressure.
Did you guys get ahead of yourselves? Like, yeah, we're winning this shit? Like early in the year or like at champs?
At champs. Well, the confidence is good.
Would it be FaZe?
When you beat FaZe, you were like, yo, this is our tournament?
Nah, I knew we won that shit like 100%. I'm not gonna lie. At least in my head.
After 3-0ing them too. Like,
bro, I was on some Jordan shit. I swear to God, if you saw me in my hotel room, like I'm sleeping. I remember I couldn't sleep going into Sunday, and I was just like, I'm fucking holding that fucking trophy up. I don't give a fuck what it takes. And
hell yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was just kind of my mindset the whole time, and yeah, I mean we got it done. That shit meant a lot to me, to be honest.
I mean, you could tell
just because like
that listening on Rewind, like it sounded like you broke down for like a
that
quick
shit was
second.
awesome.
But it was awesome, like to hear that emotion, like you go back.
And then
to
Kyle
back.
was just like, "Oh my god."
Yeah, he said, "Oh my
You're
God."
like, "Oh my god," and then you just hear Kyler at the very end. He's like, "Oh my god."
Well, I also feel like
out there from CleanX to set up all of this, and now you're 10 points away from the map 1 victory. It seems like the struggles at Hardpoint are still here for FaZe because they're getting locked down, shot out, put in the dirt. Cellium last up, and he's not going to be able to do anything. Ultra ahead early.
I got wall bang. Stop top part. Nice. Good time.
I got time.
Very fast.
Sit on. We have you. I naded my outer. Outer. A big dead.
I got you, miss.
Enter dead.
No, watch out. He's watching.
Let's enter Abe.
He's outer somewhere.
I don't see him.
He's there. He's on me.
Come on,
You're fucking shit, baby. Come on. Cell's doing fucking nothing on the map, bro. Like, it's actually insane.
So this conversation around Cellium, I don't know if it's ever going to end exactly, but it is fascinating that for Dashy, yeah, he was also kind of in that conversation for a time as being, oh yeah, well, you know, super talented, incredible shots, but does he make the right decisions on the map, and how impactful are those numbers really being? That's not a conversation around Dashy anymore, given the way that he's adapted things over the last couple of years or so. And yeah, Cellium is on a 29 streak of tournaments with a 1 or higher KD. That's not set to end anytime soon, and largely that's because Cellium's just an incredible player. Like, if you watch his POV, you know, the guy is unbelievable, right? Like, the shots that he hits, unlike not many other players can do it. It's not like you can tell your AR, like, all right, Insight, I want you to play like Cell. Like, good luck, right? It's probably not going to happen. So there's only a few players that are talented enough to be as good as Cellium is. But the conversation has been for quite a long time now, okay, is that really the best way to play the game? And not necessarily saying it's Cellium's fault precisely, because the team is clearly happy with that. But for the last couple of years, it's not really worked. So, especially at the big tournaments, right, when the pressure is at the highest. And maybe it's not Cellium's fault, because at the World Championship, if you look at, you know, I suppose their matches and stuff, we can even look at some of the individual performances at the World Championship, I suppose. I'll just deselect these and select the games they played at Champs. And you'll see that, you know, Cell had a 1.14, Drazah had a 0.83, Simp had a 0.81. And it's not like Cell was not delivering numbers, right? In previous seasons, Cell has had a pretty low Slayer rating, but a high KD. This season, to some degree, that was still true, but maybe less true than it has previously been. Like, if I'm sorting this by Slayer rating, Cellium's at an 85 Slayer rating with a 1.17 KD. So those are Cellium's numbers on the season. In Slayer rating, he's basically halfway down the league. But aBeZy's Slayer rating was actually very similar. Simp is up here at an 87 as well, and Drazah, I think, is probably slightly further down at an 84. So, you know, it's not like Cell was way slower than the rest of his team or anything, and compared to previous seasons, it was actually reasonable. But then you look at Scrappy and you see 94, and you think, like, damn, you know, that's kind of different gravy. Now, Dashy was at a pretty similar, like, he was at 87, and yeah, Dashy's overall was a 1.06 this year. So I think that's what's fascinating about, as I say, a couple of years ago, I can even sort this by Vanguard, and we can see in the Vanguard season what the numbers look like. And yeah, you guys can see Slayer rating, Dashy and Cellium were pretty similar. Actually, Cellium was slightly higher that year, which is expected kills in a 5-map series. Cell was at a 1.24, Dashy was a 1.20. You know, they were going toe-to-toe all year for that MVP race, effectively. Cell was better in hardpoint, Dashy was better in control. In terms of objective work as well, in hardpoint it was actually pretty similar. And interestingly enough, in control, Dashy was not capturing as many ticks as Cellium was back in 2022. So, you know, back then, Dashy was also not a particularly objective-orientated player by any means. But then you fast forward to the present day, and, you know, Dashy's numbers over the last couple of years have got worse, but the guy is now back-to-back world champion, right? So it's a big talking point. I thought Dashy's words there were pretty interesting. I thought Scrappy's words looking back at a year ago were pretty interesting, and maybe something for FaZe to seriously think about, especially because, you know, they're about to turn up to this year's World Championship, or World Cup, sorry, and they do not want to repeat the same mistake as last year where maybe they win it and then they still don't decide to make a change that may well be necessary. But very much enjoyed your thoughts on the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.